What happens when superheroes go on a date? It's a question that's been asked many times and answered many ways, but usually with shenanigans. However, while the comedic approach is often employed, that is not always the case, and we're going to be looking at one of those more serious outings today. We're going to be looking at a superhero date that in many ways could be deemed disastrous, but also serves as a fascinating character examination of both parties involved, their relationship to superheroing, their secret identities, and also leaves room open for something to develop potentially, because they still have a lot in common. And all of this is for a couple that a lot of people have probably never heard of. It's time to take a long overdue trip back to Astro City. We're going to be looking at the 6th issue of the first run of the series from 1995, and it's called Dinner at 8, which makes the entire affair sound much more mundane than it actually ends up being. At least the page showing the title shows that you're in for some kind of superhero flair. I'm trying not to reflect it too much at you. This is from Life in the Big City. This is all about the first date between the Samaritan, a Superman homage, and Winged Victory, a Wonder Woman homage. And there's so much to be dissected here. Layers. This issue is also the first exploration of the Samaritan's backstory in full, and an explanation and examination of Winged Victory's feminist philosophy. It's a date that ends with her throwing a scene in public, and yet the night somehow still ends with a rather meaningful kiss. Reflective kiss. It's an engrossing issue, and I wanted to share it with you. Let's discuss. Now, we discussed Astro City in the early days of this channel, and then followed up with a look at the Samaritan and his arch nemesis, the Infidel, and their yearly dinner engagement. Since they've reached a kind of impasse where neither can defeat the others, they just kind of have this dinner date where they try and sway the other to each other's side. Well, today, Asa Martin, aka the Samaritan, is gonna have food with somebody he actually likes, but still manages to kind of get into a fight with them and have a very deep philosophical conversation. And for once, when we're talking about Astro City, things are in print. Time for recording, they've been releasing collections, Metro books. I think they're up to 4 at this point, and they're doing a giant Opus edition. It says 1 at the end, and I hope that means there's gonna be a 2, because time for recording, they still haven't collected the ones I'm missing, which is fine. It's fine. It's totally fine. I'm fine. If you're interested, I'll have those links below. I know I've talked about it before and it's been out of print and difficult to find, so I'm gonna put that down there for you. Heads up, these are affiliate links, so if you do use the link to click on it, I make a tiny bit of commission. If you don't want that, you think you don't deserve those $2, well then just know that it's out there and you can go and find it somewhere else. But just if you're interested, it's there for you. Anyways, enough chit chat. I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, and let's go on a very awkward date. This issue is by Kurt Busiek, with art by Brent Anderson. Colors by Steve Buccellato. It starts off awkward right away, but one thing to note is that this is a good follow-up from the first issue with the Samaritan and just showing his headspace. When we started off in issue 1, we learned that the Samaritan is always pressed for time and is constantly thinking that he could be / should be saving someone. His personal life, non-existent, and he dreams of just being able to fly free with no concerns, just for a little bit. He also would like a companion. He's very lonely. So in this issue, his teammates took matters into their own hands and decided to set him up on a date with someone who is also lonely and who has not gone out for a while, Winged Victory. They have it all set up. They say they'll cover for them, they're not gonna have to worry about crimes, they can just go out, relax, get to know each other. And the Samaritan is entirely unsure how to go about this, and so is Winged Victory. And their kind of awkward disconnect and that they're not quite on the same wavelength is shown right away in the fact that they show up in different ways for their date, because the Samaritan shows up in full Samaritan garb. And when he shows up at her apartment, she's in her civilian clothes. Hello? Oh, I'm sorry, I must be at the wrong. No, come on in, Samaritan, I'm her. I just didn't know, whether you'd be showing up as yourself or as, well, I thought this was safest all around. I understand. These are for you then? Thanks, they're lovely. She's not really all that bothered and quickly changes into her superhero persona so that they can go out. She's just trying to match what the vibe seems to be. She does this via the amulet on her neck, and she just assumes that he's not ready to show his secret identity, and that's fine, she gets it. When you're in the superhero game, sometimes you need a superhero identity. That's just how it is. We are pre the late 2010s, 2020s idea that even having a secret identity is some kind of betrayal, which is an interesting idea to interrogate, but oftentimes does not factor in the in-universe concerns that would lead to one having to need that. Anyway, the Samaritan still doesn't feel that he has time for this. She's beautiful. She's beautiful and intelligent and brave and forthright, and I can't stop myself from thinking there's no point to this. I'm too busy. I don't have time. If I did have time to ask someone to dinner, she'd be at the top of the list. This is priceless, isn't it? The world's most prominent superhero and superheroine, and neither of us has been out on a date in so long, we've forgotten how it works. So they're not even sure where to go. This was not planned in any way. It's spontaneous, and that's not really working out very well. So at first, Winged Victory decides why not go where they're gonna cause a bit of a stir. People have already seen them together because they're flying over the city, so let's give them something to talk about, basically. So they go to a fancy restaurant, and she makes note that the Samaritan takes his superheroing really seriously because he didn't even contemplate going civilian for their date. Also, he did order a club soda. To which he expresses some of his anxieties, not in so many words, but by saying, yes, others are covering for them, but you never know, they might be needed. So again, that nicely harkens back to his attitude from the first issue. He just needs to constantly be on. But they can't really talk here because people keep interrupting them, and they want autographs, and they just want to see the heroes. So they end up just having drinks and leaving. So at this point, Samaritan decides to take over. And he decides they need to go somewhere where they can talk. So they go to just this greasy burger joint, and they go as their civilian forms. This way they can have a conversation, and it's gonna be too loud and too many people for people to be paying attention to what they're saying or really look at them. Side note, this is the second time that the Samaritan has defaulted to burgers when it's been his choice to pick a place to eat. He did it one year with the Infidel too. I think he just likes burgers. I understand. A man after my own heart. Cheap burgers all day, every day. He does reveal his secret identity to her here, highlighting that the issue wasn't that, but rather separating from work, essentially. Name's Samartian. I work as a fact checker for Current magazine, the News Weekly. Really? No offense. But it's not the sort of thing I'd have imagined for you. It's not much of a job, is it? I don't need that much. This lets me tap news feeds with my Ziometer, sort of an organic computer. And I can take off whenever I need to, as long as the work gets done. Well, yes, but surely you could get whatever connections you want from the government or from any TV station for free. We then get his backstory, which is rather sad. The Samaritan is a survivor from a no longer existing timeline. He was sent back in time to correct a key event that was said to lead to their dystopian time, which was a time that was actually ruled by the Infidel, which he did not know at that time. So when he ends up erasing it, he displaces both of them, which is the start of their rivalry. It was going back in time that gave him his powers, and so instead of infiltrating society slowly like he initially planned, he instead spent the time leading up to the incident just trying to learn how to control his abilities. And so when the time came, all he could think of to do was a big bombastic save. It's also what he had learned to do with his powers. As a result, this thrust him into the public eye. And the reaction was more than I was prepared for. Sir, are you a new superhero? Will you be joining Honor Guard? How do you know there'd be a disaster? Was it an attack? Please, I'm not that important. Just call me a good Samaritan. I tapped into various computer systems, creating a data trail. Used my power to leech the blue out of my hair and got a job where I could interact with society, where I could build myself a life. His timeline is gone. He details how he did go back to the 35th century to try and look and see what was there, but his family was gone. And in his home's place was a taco stand. How my time trip lets me exist without any parents, I don't know. But the world I came from is gone. It simply never was. They're having a bit of a moment at this. Sad backstories will do that. But they're also still checking on what's going on in the world and seeing and just making sure that the Honor Guard is actually keeping up with all the crime, because neither of them can fully disconnect. They're not fully disengaged. They're here, but they're still not fully focused on what's going on. We're a couple of workaholics, it seems. Addicted to our beepers. What a 90s phrase. It still works. Now we'd just be addicted to our phones or whatever, chip implants in our arms. Hey, I'll turn mine off if you turn yours off. Point taken. Still, I wish I'd been able to get Golden Boy myself. The way he uses his enhanced charisma to ensnare women, I'd like to have made him eat that smirk of his. And so now we get to talk about Winged Victory, because at this point the Samaritan notes that she does go after a certain type of criminal, and she says that that's entirely deliberate, that she is trying to send a message. She specifically goes after people who are targeting women. She does it for a couple of reasons, to try and elevate women and to also show them that they don't always need men to protect them. And here's where things get complicated and interesting, because here we learn that she very much prioritizes women to the point that she will save them first, which is something that takes the Samaritan aback a little bit, but he's also willing to discuss it. Wait a minute. Say you've got a man falling to his death here and a woman drowning there. You'd ignore the man to save the woman consciously? All other things being equal, yes. But why? Because I've got a message to send to women. Not just that they can be heroic, but that they matter, they count. That's why I've never joined Honor Guard. So my accomplishments will be seen as a woman's accomplishments, not just part of what a team does. Still, it's just as heroic for a woman to save men if they need it. Sure, and I do that, but I was granted these powers for a reason, to inspire women. I think that's perfectly legitimate. Oh, so if you don't favor women, you'd lose your powers. I can understand that. No, it's starting to go downhill. But it's also a very fascinating discussion for the reader to ponder and think about and examine their reaction to what she's saying and how it makes them feel and why. Also, this dialogue does take into account the pressures that Winged Victory has placed upon her, both internally and externally, not just from public perception, but also from herself, the woman she saves, and the source from which she gets her powers. There's a lot going on. Just like the Samaritan, she too can't relax, but for different reasons. Now, she does fire back at him that he makes the exact same types of decisions, but he prioritizes based on time. I prioritize by sex, by what message I send. We're still choosing to save lives, but we can't save everybody, and there's more than enough for both of us to do, right? All right, so you're choosing to send a message when possible. I can see that. I guess I thought you did that mostly with the shelters you run. You've got, what, a dozen of them now? So Winged Victory also has a bunch of shelters. She has a lot going on, and she goes on that, yes, she does do that, but also she doesn't consider them shelters because she's transformed them into places where women can learn self-defense, to defend themselves. This because she doesn't want women to come to depend on her. Basically, there's a lot of tension she's constantly having to be aware of and police/curate her own image. But this also highlights that she's also trapped by a way in her persona, just as the Samaritan is trapped in his. Both have been kind of forced into the images they now occupy. And while they both find them fulfilling and important, there is some tension there. Because Asa doesn't really have anything else, because his original mission is complete and he just keeps maintaining to make sure some kind of awful future doesn't arise. He too has become a beacon for heroism, but not by choice. In the same way the expectations of all womanhood seem to be placed upon Winged Victory, or so she perceives that they are. And this drives her to make some choices that are deemed very biased or extreme by others, and at times they are. I think if I stepped back and looked at it from outside, I'd just crack from the enormity of it all. But everybody needs to step back to get some perspective. Even if it's just in Europe, but you wouldn't need that. You must have family, friends to turn to from before. Actually, I don't change back to my normal form that often. I live at one of the schools. The apartment I met you at belongs to one of our accountants. I don't think I've been back to my hometown or seen my mom in, geez, it's coming up on 2 years now? Really? Wow. You're almost as cut off as I am. This exchange is so well written, you can almost feel his foot entering his mouth. And the little hand pat as he's saying it just adds to the perfection. He's accidentally being so condescending while trying to be understanding. It's really well written. He's not meaning to be hurtful here, and yet you just know she's not gonna take it well. It's not gonna go well. He's about to hit a nerve, precisely because he's not entirely wrong. She's very isolated, but she hasn't taken the time to look at it like that before because no one's been there to challenge her on it. Oh, come on. I don't have the luxury you do, keeping a secret identity you don't even use. I mean, where is this normal life you say you want? You're always on the go. You barely even have time for tonight. Why not just pack it in? Well, there's always hope. Maybe you're fine. Maybe you're still the woman you were, just more powerful and effective. But it seems to me that, well, if you don't deal with the world through anything but the costume and the mission, hasn't Winged Victory become a kind of shelter herself? Yeah, she snaps after that and goes full Winged Victory, rather than dealing with what he said as her civilian self, which in a way demonstrates his point. As she changes, I'm already down, already changing myself, hoping none of the other patrons took a good look at the couple having a fight. Ah, their first fight. Over cheap burgers at a crowded family restaurant. You know that's going in the gossip column. And now she really lashes out at him. And again, it's a strong moment because it showcases how when people are hurt, they can really turn around and try and just spread that hurt back out. He shared some really intimate things with her and she's about to slap him with them. Just because you destroyed your whole world and been trying to make up for it ever since doesn't mean I have to go crawling back to that broken, pathetic, scared little thing I once was. I like what I am. I like it. It was at that moment he realized he'd Also, no, he didn't destroy his world, but I see what she's trying to say, but that kind of thing's not gonna land. He's already made peace with what happened to where he came from. Still, hurtful. The way this is written, the fight, it has a lot of genuineness to it, and the layers to which you can see how what they're saying doesn't match the feeling behind it. That is 100% not a woman who is entirely fine with how she is and clearly has some issues with working through her persona and how she felt before. Just the idea of weakness and fear that she felt as a woman that she's now trying to alleviate through this persona. There's a lot going on there. It's very deep. She's lashing out because he rocked her foundation, even though he didn't try to hurt her on purpose. He took her dig at him without even blinking. Probably because not only has he dealt with what happened to his timeline, because as he said that was the mission, they knew it was probably going to happen, but also because he's well aware of the flaws that he has. He knows that he's not living his life to the fullest, but he'd kind of just resigned himself to it. So having that thrown in his face isn't going to have the exact same effect, but it is going to give him something to ponder. He does follow her to apologize, and she's a bit calmer after a good old-fashioned storm off, or rather fly off. Look, you're really annoying. You know that? I didn't mean to. Just be quiet for a second, okay? It's like you're a god pretending to be normal. I'm a normal woman trying to live up to the role of a god. Letting go of that, even for just a little while, well, it's hard to believe I'll ever capture it again. I guess I never looked at it that way. See, all of this is very interesting because he can't let go either. Side note, he was an ordinary person at one point. He hasn't been for a while, but she's not entirely right in her assessment of him. But it's different because unlike her, who has a regular life to go back to that she's neglecting as an ordinary person, he has to create that person, and he doesn't have the option of not having all his abilities all the time. So really, he needs to build what she already has and is not using anymore. Also, she feels insignificant as herself, which may be part of why she was so quick to share her secret identity. She doesn't give it much importance. Plus all the pressures and connections that she feels to the world, he's disconnected from. It's more abstract for him. Yes, he wants to save the world and make it a safe place, but he doesn't have that same feeling of personal attachment because of how he's come to it. And yet, he also feels a similar sense of responsibility. They've both become tied to their roles, tied to superheroing to help craft their identities and sense of worth and purpose, both to their detriments. In many ways, they have some core kinships, even if they also have some differences, but those core strengths could be something that binds them together. These core similarities are manifesting in different ways, and that allows them to play off of each other. Don't worry about it. You've given me a lot to think about. Just as long as it hasn't been entirely one-sided. No, you said some things I haven't considered, but maybe I should. Listen. What? Nothing. No gunshots, no screams, no explosions, no avalanches, no screeching tires, no death rays, no alien attackers, just a moment of peace and quiet. And in that moment of nothing else that they both know is so significant because it's so rare, the two really connect and the air is cleared and their connection and attraction to each other comes through and they share a kiss. But just as quickly as it happens, it's over. But he overhears her as they go their separate ways, echoing something that he said and his philosophy about there always being hope, and it makes him smile. And showcases that maybe they're a bit more alike than they think, and also that maybe there is some hope for the two of them. Which proves to be the case because they are shown as in a relationship, and a healthy one at that, in the future. What a date. Very awkward, but also intellectually stimulating, and with a hopeful undercurrent, even though it didn't go very well. The way that the characters' different backgrounds and philosophies are actually addressed and clash, but they attempt to find understanding since they both ultimately have the same goal, is very well done. The argument builds in a very realistic manner, and you can feel the tension start to escalate the more they talk. It really masters that feeling of being in a conversation that you can feel heading towards some dicey territory, but you're already in too deep. Also, you actually want to know. It also handles them not being exactly what the other expected well, both in their dialogue and also visually in how they approach each other from the very beginning when they appear in their differing personas for the date, or the way they choose different places. Winged Victory's need to present herself a certain way very perfectly aligning with her choosing the public upscale restaurant, while the Samaritan's more subdued approach and lack of strong personal identity is well presented by choosing a location where he can just blend into the background. And neither is fully comfortable at the other's location of choice, which again is a good representation for where their relationship is at the moment. They're both so fleshed out here that they move beyond, oh, this is a Superman stand-in and a Wonder Woman stand-in on a date. That's there, but they feel very much like themselves as well. And because they don't have that long shared history that Superman and Wonder Woman do, you can examine different things. There are some seeds shown here to indicate that they could either work or not work. At the moment, they don't seem to have the best potential for a relationship because of where they both are personally in their own lives. But also, there are some strengths that are showcased by them together. Look at how much they grew and learned learn from each other just from this one conversation. There are very few people in this world who can really make you take a look at yourself and potentially change for the better, and that's really special. It's so significant that even though they don't fully understand each other, they're shown as willing to engage and listen. It lays the groundwork for how they can end up together. And by that point, you can see that they've both subtly changed. But at the moment, yeah, I mean, their dedication to the mission is so much that they couldn't even get through an entire date without checking what was going on in the world. It's interesting, gives you a lot to work with. It shows you why it could fall apart, but also why they would gravitate towards each other. This is a date issue that sticks with you. It really could have gone your standard, oh ho ho, these two heroes are on a date and things aren't going well. Oh no, a monster crashed their date. Instead, it's a mature, not necessarily how the characters always act, but in terms of ground covered and showcasing different types of conversations and how these things can play out. It feels like a more adult outing, and that is very much appreciated, not in the sense of adult means swearing and sex and violence, which is not what it has to mean at all. It's a good entry in the tapestry that is Astro City, and really helps you understand where the Samartian and Winged Victory are coming from and helps provide context for both of them when you see them in other stories. It's a strong issue and I wanted to share it with you, and now I want to hear from you. What do you think? Are they meant to be? Was this really a bad and awkward date, or was it not so bad? Have you seen much worse or been on worse? Which superhero goes in a date issue that you enjoy? Please, shenanigans welcome. Are you down to explore more Astro City? Share your thoughts down below, and while you're down there, please do all YouTube things like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some time today spent discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye bye. Astro City.